Hello, hello. How's it going?
It's good. How are you?
Good, good. Are you having nice weather by you?
Yeah. Thanks. What is it today? 60?
Yeah, I'm out. I'm in
64.
Greeley right now, and we're up to 66, which is nice.
Nice.
Whoa. Dylan, you should be a presenter if you want to try sharing your screen and make sure that that works.
Okay. I'm using this as a browser, which is always a mistake, but let me make sure I can.
I do the same thing. You can do it on a browser.
Okay. Sounds good. Make this full
Realize I'm
screen.
just a voice in the room. If
I
you
was
need
just
help.
about to say, Rhiannon, and hi, are you there in person? Good to see you.
Hey, Rosie.
I thought I
Um,
brought enough water, but
If you need backup.
I know, yeah, she's covered, I think. I mean,
In case she runs out.
small
My emotional support water bonnet. It's good on our end.
Yeah. I think we can.
cool.
Yeah. we can make that.
Oh,
Yeah. I think. I don't know if you can see, I have two computers going. So I got you
cool.
up there. I am on the school board for Clear Creek.
You're a Clear Creek school person.
Yes.
I'm happy to have you here. I don't think we've met.
Okay.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, yay. Happy that Clear Creek School.
And then I'm gonna steal it back from you.
I don't think we, I'm not Houston City Council.
Oh, you are? Okay, so I've just put lotion.
No,
Okay. Nice to meet you.
What's your name? Janine.
Janine, oh, I think we have met.
Maybe we have, you're, sorry, what is your name?
Erica,
I talked,
did you come into the Emerge meeting last time?
I came to the Emerge meeting.
Or maybe not last time, but the
a
time
few months
before.
ago.
So I was at
I-
that one, but I think you also spoke.
I talked to the school board.
Yes.
Through CASA.
Yes. Yeah, I was like, I know I've seen you. Yes.
Yes, yes, that's what it is.
Yeah, I can.
Feels.
Oh, different connection.
Are you an HP user? Okay, no. It crashed my Mac.
No, I didn't.
Yes, running WebEx in Teams.
Because
Killed,
they're Microsoft.
killed.
Dead?
Yeah, I mean, I still have it, but like I have to leave it plugged in. I definitely have to get a new one. It's also 2015. It's called Vintage.
Yeah, but that's just like the
Vintage.
I'm using the HP that they got me and I'm so incompetent. It took me like a month to figure out like how to access things. I was like sending people the wrong,
Save things.
where they go.
I struggle with
It's like so sad. There are water and snacks here and then,
So those, it looked like there were 10 pages, so I
Yes.
just separated them.
thank you. Yeah.
Make myself easy.
Here. Dylan's gonna have it in digital format, but if you want paper format.
Skip those for you because I need to feel like I'm doing something. It's a me problem, not a you problem.
Tricks with the internet.
Hi there.
You,
Oh, yes.
Give us a hug.
you may. Great day.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for the kind words.
Done so many great things.
That's like say action needed, doesn't it? It doesn't look like reading.
Be a stranger. I won't be hard to find. So you
Oh,
still want to chat. I'm here.
All right, good.
It's been such a pleasure. Honestly, all of my best friends live in Wheat Ridge.
Yeah.
And I always get to tell them, I'm hanging out with Bud today, near Bud. I love it.
All right.
Get some snacks, get cozy.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, these are worksheets for today's
I
presentation.
have a homework? Do you know about the?
Yes, that's what you just told me. Turn around, right behind you.
Yeah, so
All of
it's
the
asking,
info.
here's your name and password though. Did you say guest?
Did you do Jeffco guest?
It's about the username and password.
No, up here. Click on that bad boy. Now go to other
Oh,
networks.
then they're wrong.
No, you're probably in, I led you astray with settings. Yeah. Now pick
Oh,
Jeffco
just
guest.
Jeffco guest.
And now it should just let
Okay,
you, you'll get a pop-up that's like, do you agree to our internet terms? There you go.
Perfect, thank you.
And now you should be in.
Looking at my first one, I'm trying to get, oh yeah, okay.
Beef jerky. I'm eating snacks because no one ever ate my snack.
George was making fun of me because he just like wanted almonds and I'm like, you can't just have fat, you need protein.
Almonds, George. I've tried donuts and candy. I've tried healthy food. The people won't eat it no matter what you bring.
That's why you put the M&Ms with it.
Exactly.
And then Rosie, I just made you a co-host.
Perfect. And I've got my eye on my inbox in case anyone has technical issues.
Okay.
I can't believe how hot it is outside. It's like hot.
We went from like 2 feet of snow to like
Welcome to
7.
Colorado, Chelsea.
The weather's bipolar.
It is.
My bipolar mood feel better.
It does. It totally does. And it doesn't get better. Like March is worse.
Yes.
April's even a tease too. It really is.
In Florida, we have fake fall.
Fake.
What is
Yeah,
that?
It's like one day of 50
It
degrees.
is, it's like one day it's fall and you're finally like, it's not humid. The leaves change like overnight and then the next day you're back to 90%.
Back to hot. I was like, that's
And then
less.
right humidity.
Where in Florida were you?
Tallahassee.
Oh, hot.
Basically Georgia.
Yeah,
Yeah. And there's nothing to do there.
no, I'm more familiar with Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi than
Yeah.
Florida.
Yeah.
There's not,
I was basically there.
they're just a little sticky
Yeah.
all the time.
No.
You save your shower before bedtime, right?
Never get behind that. I like, that's what the people do. But you're just so sticky
So
when you
then you
wake
shower
up.
twice.
Yeah.
The worst was like the Florida State campus is you park your car and then you have like a 20-30 minute walk to your office.
Ugh.
Then you have another 20-30 minute walk across campus to class, another 20-30 minute walk back to your office. So I was hitting like maybe 25,000 steps a day, but I was just constantly sweating.
Are you having to wear professional clothing in this?
Oh, no, I
time?
wore-
No.
I was in
wear-
student
yeah.
affairs.
Okay,
I worked
great.
directly with students.
Much better.
No, I was in gym clothes, but I did have classmates who had to wear suits because they worked in the
Yeah.
foundation. I was like, no, I do yoga and
I will
like
not.
walking.
And then all the air conditioners are set at 60 degrees, so you're freezing.
yeah.
I hate that.
And can't you just do like 75? So it's just like cool enough that you're not
Bit of
dying.
a break. Then you get the like, now I'm making it too personal, but then you get the like cold sweats.
Yeah.
Worst. Okay, I'll stop there. Everyone online who just heard about my cold sweats, you're welcome. Chelsea, just so you know, we're having Burke join too, to
Okay.
just continue to familiarize and. I can also join via my computer, but I didn't use the sound.
That's what I have this one muted. And
So
then just the sound off. Yours usually join.
join, and then you can see my face and I'll just mute my device.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Cool. And the sound sounds good online.
Okay. Bruce said Stedman is going to miss its sweaty consultant.
I knew someone heard that. You're welcome, everyone.
Last I heard, Leslie and George were gonna be here in person, so I'm kind of surprised they are not here. I wonder if I can, I can't.
So is it better to join the meeting here on the web link? Is that kind of the right way to do this?
We were just having that conversation for me. If you want to join so that if you have something to say, that people can see your
Yeah.
face,
Mhm.
you can join from the web link.
Okay.
But then what we'll want to do is make sure your device is muted,
Okay.
so we don't get feedback from the
So
room.
this would be the link, right?
Yep, you click on. Might take you to an
You'll
agenda.
turn the sound on. So I'm not
Do
broadcasting.
you mind if I,
No.
Do you,
there you go, that you need to see the X.
which area do you cover?
Over by King Murphy. That's
Oh, okay.
district, yeah.
District, that was the word I was looking for. I was
Yep.
like, what?
Over there.
Try minimizing the screen. It might have opened on your browser behind you. So if you click that, it probably takes you to like an internet tab.
Here, on this one? Try it again here.
Should be opening for you. Oh yeah, what's that? Oh, are you on the internet? That's probably why. Let's get you connected to the internet. So get out of this friend. You might just be able to click that.
That's
text,
supposed to be filling this out, or is this for during the meeting?
What's that?
And then.
Dylan's gonna go over it in the meeting. Okay.
Is it the-
Hello, hello. You're welcome.
Okay.
And then if you connect automatically. Sorry that I'm.
Okay,
in your
that's okay.
business. Okay, now if you open that email again and click the link, it should open for you.
Hello. How are you? Yeah, Sherry, thanks. Hello. Hi, nice to see you.
Yeah,
Ooh, I can get you there from here.
okay.
So
There's your meeting.
it's how I asked her, like, she's like, oh, that's
Okay.
What's that?
Browser, that's a cheat
Okay.
code. If you download the app, you'll get all lost.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And you want to accept these bad boys.
It's just been like a breath of fresh
And then
air.
join as guest.
She's so smart. And she's just a lot of.
And now you just need to put your name and your email.
I saw that she just celebrated her, was it her 15th wedding anniversary or something like that? It was Facebook, so I.
I'm trying to remember how many years behind us they are.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess 16, I can't remember. So cool to see. Yeah, really nice to see.
That guy.
Oh.
There you go. It'll show up.
Okay.
Oh, looks like we got lots of people joining us online, huh?
It's gonna work.
Okay. So we-
You should allow this.
Monday today for some reason. I don't know. Other than the fact that it is, but it's worse than
I
normal.
was like, is it not gonna be?
Yeah, I know. I know. Wait. See what I mean? That's exactly what I mean. Oh, gosh. Hi over there, Mayor Starker.
Hello, Commissioner, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Hi.
So glad you're here.
Me too. Me too.
Hello.
How are you?
Good to see you.
How
You betcha.
you doing?
Good,
Good to
good.
see you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, everything's good. Everything's going well. Yeah, yeah. So far, so good. I know we've got our municipal meeting coming up here in a couple weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
You and Mary are doing well.
Everything is fine. Yeah, everybody's good. Yeah.
I'm going at it. We are just waiting for Commissioner.
See, Grace, she's got spring break.
Garden.
Where is she now?
She's in San Francisco, going to University of San Francisco. So.
Yeah, there he is. All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming to the Gateway to the Rockies Region 10 Opioid Abatement Council meeting. My name is Dr. Chelsea and I am the program manager. I did drop the agenda in the chat if you're joining us online. And then we're gonna start off with some introductions and attendance. Then we're gonna do some governance and then I will switch it off to today's educational workshop. If you could just say here, Commissioner Dahlkemper,
Here, hi, everyone.
Commissioner Marlin,
Here online today. Hello.
Commissioner Sandy,
Hello, I'm here.
Michael Prang,
I'm here.
Heidi McCollum? Or Stephen Potts? Not here. Kevin Armstrong?
I'm here.
Okay. Mayor Bud?
Speaking here.
Janie?
Here, Janine.
Janine? And then how do you say your last name?
Mariani.
Mariani. Thank you. You are new. Welcome. Troy Cooper? Thought I saw him come in. Or Tori Jantz? Okay, we'll come back. Michael Miller or Dr. Story? I don't see either. Dr. Ryan? Alyssa Witt?
Elisa Witt's here, thank you. It's okay.
Mary Berger, Barb Weinstein?
Hi, it's Barb Weinstein.
Sarah?
I'm here.
Janie?
I am here.
Kristen?
I'm here.
We're at quorum, right? Yes.
Yes.
There is a non-voting member check-in QR code right here. If people could please do that. You're also being asked to submit any potential conflicts of interest in that form. So far, we have Bobby Putnam, Tanya Wheeler, and Brian Tierney. Tanya Wheeler is a current grantee of GROC for Advocates for Recovery Colorado. Again, we do ask that everyone in attendance do complete that. I'll check back.
I just got it in the chat.
Okay, thanks. So we have an approval of January.
I'm relatively new. I'm Sophia. I'm with Lakewood City Council. I was not clear that Lakewood is not a voting member or is, so I just wanted clarification.
Is a voting member.
You are a voting member. So if you're an alternate or a voting member, then you don't have to check in.
Great. Well, I also wasn't in the attendance. I just wanted to clarify that I am here.
You're for Mayor Bud, right?
No, Mayor Strom.
Oh, alternate. I can help explain. Hi, Councilwoman Mayo Guerrero. It's great to see you. Thanks so much for being here today. You are correct. Sophia is the alternate to Bud as our municipal representative.
All right, got it. Okay, but Bud's here today. Excellent, clear. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you so much. Great to see you. Glad you're with us.
Thank you. All right, so I have approval of January 27th meeting minutes. That is linked in the agenda.
Are you looking for a motion?
I'm gonna scroll through. For a minute.
I have a correction to propose.
Yes.
Yeah. I read it online on the GROC site, so if that's the right version, it had George and I mixed up, or it said I was Clear Creek and it said he was Gilpin.
Oh.
Does it still say that? Not in the attendance. Was there some other?
No.
It might have been the only place. And then I think that Janie came in late but was present, but she's on today. She can confirm or not.
Sandy, this is Rhiannon speaking. I see in the January minutes where you are listed as Clear Creek and George is listed as Gilpin, so I'm switching that right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. You bet.
And then Janie.
Yeah, I did come in about an hour late on that meeting.
Right, but she was present. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Again, if you are checking in the chat on WebEx, please use the attendance link. or the QR code to check in. All right, looking for a motion to approve the January 27th meeting minutes. Mayor Bud motions. Is there a second?
This is Leslie. I'll go ahead and second.
Leslie seconded. We're gonna vote by opposition in the chat. And I don't see anything, so the January 27th meeting minutes are approved. We will move in to conflicts of interest for today's meeting. And then this is why we ask people to check in the chat. Are there any conflicts of interest from voting members first? I'm not seeing any. So in terms of members who are present, again, Tanya Wheeler, Advocates for Recovery, is a current grantee. Sean Henley is an advisory board member, also planning to apply for GROC funds. Thalia Rodriguez from JCMH is a current grantee. Erica Hag is the board member of several things. Clear Creek School Board, 1220 and Echo. Yes. We also have President Laurel Beckel, Amber Qatar, Burke Fishburne, who is from Sedman Group, Chris Habgood, Dylan Braun, Alexandra Colcutt, Sharon Hawkins, Brian T, and Bobby Putnam. All right. And now, without any further ado, I have the extreme privilege and honor, I'm going to embarrass you so much right now, to introduce the Dylan Dunn from SAFE Project. He serves as the Senior Director of the SAFE Campuses team. He has been a longtime mentor of mine, and he actually sent me the job posting to be the program manager for GROC. So you all have him to thank. And I have asked him to come do one of his presentations on paradigms for addiction and substance use recovery. So I will turn it over to Dylan.
Well, thanks. Good to see everybody. I'm going to share my screen quick and make sure everything works. How about let's do this one. Should be good. Should see the screen, should hear me. At any point, if anybody has, I always say this at the beginning, if you have questions, concerns, feedback, I am online, obviously, so I can see the chat, so feel free to use that. I'm not a huge rules of order person, so like I don't mean to make things more chaotic here, but please feel free to engage however you want. As Chelsea said, I'm excited to be here. My name is Dylan Dunn. I work at a nonprofit called SAFE Project. I'll explain that in a second. But yeah, we're here to talk about a workshop that I've given across the country to different groups, but it's on what we call the paradigm survey. But the real purpose of today's session is just the idea that how we think about substance use matters. I know that's not revolutionary to any of you. Hopefully some talking will be helpful as you think about applications or even just working together on a day-to-day basis. So my plan for today is to help you understand, help you gain an understanding of this model we're going to talk about. There are 4 paradigms. They work together, or sometimes they work in opposition. How do they influence the work that we do? We're going to reflect on your results to a survey that you already have access to, but I'm going to walk you through that survey. And then we're going to consider application. I know Chelsea's going to spend more time in later meetings really digging into how you apply this information. My job today is mostly to introduce you to it and to help you kind of make sense of the process of gaining clarity around paradigms. But I'm going to introduce myself a bit more and the organization I work for. We're going to do this survey. We're going to overview your results. We're going to reflect on the results, and then we'll have some time, hopefully at the end, to do some Q&A. That's my face. You see my face multiple times now. As was said, my name is Dylan. I'm the Senior Director of Safe Campuses at a national nonprofit called SAFE Project. SAFE stands for Stop the Addiction Fatality Epidemic. I'm not from Colorado, I'm from Ohio, but I've lived in Colorado since 2016, I think. I went to college in Ohio and then moved to Colorado to go to Colorado State University for grad school. And then when I was at CSU, a student passed away at DU here in Denver. And after his passing, his family pushed the university to start a collegiate recovery program. I was hired to start that program. And then after a year of being at DU, they hired me onto their team. And I've been at Safe Project now since 2019, I think. That sounds right. This is my email on the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions that you don't want to put in the chat or that you don't know if you want to discuss as a whole group today, feel free to start an email to me now and just write notes and questions and stuff and just send me whatever your thoughts are at the end. I'm more than glad to get an unstructured email than no email. So send me what you got. Quick overview so you know who Safe Project is. You can also just Google this if you want. But Safe Project is 4 main teams. We're a national nonprofit, as I said, but we have the Safe Campuses team, which I am the head of, our Safe Communities team, our Safe Workplaces team, our Safe Veterans team. We do a lot of different stuff, but mostly what we do is technical assistance. And so that is all towards our mission of contributing in a tangible way to overcoming the addiction epidemic in the United States. It would take me a whole other hour to explain all of what we do, but maybe if you have questions, again, send me an email or ask Chelsea. And I know she's worked with us in different worlds of what we do or different arms and legs of our organization. So just to get us moving, because I know it's going to take us forever if I keep talking about the stuff that you're actually not here to talk about, is we're going to start by taking the survey, or we call the Paradigms Inventory. And so each of you should, if you're in person, have access to a hard copy. If you are not in person, I know I was on the email where you were sent the digital copy, but I know that digital copy is not the most, it's hard to edit that PDF for many of us. And so if you want, just either scrap piece of paper or open a blank document on your computer and number that document 1 through 32. We're going to be 32 total statements, and you're going to rank each of those statements on a score, or going to give each of those statements a score of 0 to 5. On the screen, you see a key if you need that, if that's useful for you. 0 means I hate the statement, I don't like it, get it out of my life, I never agree with it. 5 means this is like the central part of my work. Many of these statements will land somewhere in between a 0 and a 5 for you. My goal is for me to read out each statement twice. And by the end of me reading a statement twice, you will be able to give it any score 0 to 5. If you are confused after me reading the statement, just skip it. It's okay. There are no right or wrong answers here. But the goal is we're going to move quickly for the purpose of revealing the ways that we think about this work without thinking hard about it. I'll explain more what that means towards the end of that. But again, over the next 6 or 7 slides, I'm going to read each of these 32 statements. I'm going to read them twice, and then I'm going to move on to the next one. If you feel like you're falling behind, just skip the ones that you've fallen behind on and just join us whenever you can. But again, give each statement a score 0 to 5. If you need a pen, Chelsea's going to throw it at you. If you're online and you need a pen, you're going to move to a digital document instead. Let's get started. So the first 4 statements, again, you're going to give each of these statements a score 0 to 5, 0 meaning you never agree with this, 5 meaning it's core to how you do your work or how you understand this work. Statement number 1, if our communities, workplaces, or schools normalize making better decisions, we can prevent substance misuse. If our communities, workplaces, or schools normalize making better decisions, we can prevent substance misuse. Number 2, quality of recovery or quality of someone's recovery can be measured by the alleviation of substance use disorder symptoms. Number 2, quality of recovery can be measured by the alleviation of substance use disorder symptoms. Number 3, person-first language is useful as it helps us center the humanity of an individual over a diagnosis. I'll say that again. Person-first language is useful as it helps us center the humanity of an individual over a diagnosis. Again, if there's a term in here anywhere that you're uncomfortable with or not sure about, feel free to skip it or make a note for yourself. Number 4, our understanding of addiction is largely shaped by the judgments we make about drugs and the people who use them. Our understanding of addiction is largely shaped by the judgments we make about drugs and the people who use them. Those are the first four. Number 5, stigma is one of the most harmful aspects of substance use disorder. Stigma is one of the most harmful aspects of substance use disorder. Number 6, use of substances at an early age, before the brain is fully formed, is a clear cause of addiction. Use of substances at an early age, before the brain is fully formed, is a clear cause of addiction. Number 7, one of the most dangerous influences for a person with substance use disorder is people who enable their addictive behaviors. One of the most dangerous influences for a person with a substance use disorder is people who enable their addictive behaviors. If you did happen to work ahead and do all of this before we started today, feel free to check out, listen to my voice, and nap if you need to. Number 8, diagnosing someone with a substance use disorder is less important than helping someone define their personal relationship with substances. Diagnosing someone with a substance use disorder is less important than helping someone define their personal relationship with substances. Number 9, our focus on alcohol and other drugs often serves as a barrier to truly addressing underlying needs. Again, our focus on alcohol and other drugs often serves as a barrier to truly addressing underlying needs. Number 10, our culture's hypernormalization of substance misuse makes recovery more difficult than it needs to be. Our culture's hypernormalization of substance misuse makes recovery more difficult than it needs to be. Number 11, addiction is a disease. Again, number 11, addiction is a disease. Number 12, recovery is a process of redemption and becoming a better person. Recovery is a process of redemption and becoming a better person. Number 13, it is critical that our communities, workplaces, or schools do not tolerate individuals or groups who use drugs. It is critical that our communities, workplaces, or schools do not tolerate individuals or groups who use drugs. Number 14, abstinence is an important first step in overcoming addiction. Abstinence is an important first step in overcoming addiction. Number 15, recovery pathways should be unique and tailored to each individual on their own terms. Recovery pathways should be unique and tailored to each individual on their own terms. And then our halfway question, stigma causes us to focus on social consequences of substance use rather than well-being and the deeper causes of addiction. Stigma causes us to focus on social consequences of substance use rather than well-being and deeper causes of addiction. Number 17, substance use disorder should be diagnosed by a medical or mental health professional. Substance use disorder should be diagnosed by a medical or mental health professional. 18, if individuals knew more about substances, their use would decrease. If individuals knew more about substances, their use would decrease. 19, people with substance use disorder know what is best for them, even if it includes continued use. People with substance use disorder know what is best for them, even if it includes continued use. Number 20, there are fundamental differences between people with substance use disorder and those who can casually use substances. There are fundamental differences between people with substance use disorder and those who can casually use substances. Usually at this point, people start getting a little stressed about how quickly we're moving. My goal again is just to give us what your gut tells you the number should be for you. Not what you think you should say, but what your gut says you want to say or what you kind of usually would say about that statement. 21. Once someone develops an addiction, the addiction is part of them for the rest of their life. Once someone develops an addiction, the addiction is part of them for the rest of their life. (22) Societal norms and prejudice heavily influence how we decide who does or does not have substance use disorder. Again, societal norms and prejudice heavily influence how we decide who does or does not have substance use disorder. Number 23, no matter the cause of addiction, individuals are responsible for their own recovery. No matter the cause of addiction, individuals are responsible for their own recovery. Number 24, I struggle to fully trust someone when I learn that they use drugs. I struggle to fully trust someone when I learn that they use drugs. Number 25, generalized approaches to treatment and recovery are very unlikely to be helpful. Generalized approaches to treatment and recovery are very unlikely to be helpful. 26, the perceived differences between illicit and prescription drugs are more indicative of stigma than science. The perceived differences between illicit and prescription drugs are more indicative of stigma than science. 27, when I know that someone uses drugs or has a substance use disorder, I find myself wondering, are they intoxicated, drunk, or high when I interact with them? When I know that someone uses drugs or has a substance use disorder, I find myself wondering, are they intoxicated, drunk, or high when I interact with them? 28. Addiction must be viewed in relation to co-occurring mental health conditions and traumas. Addiction must be viewed in relation to co-occurring mental health conditions and traumas. We have 4 more. Then you're done listening to me calmly read you way too many sentences. 29. One day we will discover a cure for addiction. One day we will discover a cure for addiction. Number 30. When I talk about a person struggling with substance use, I refer to them as a person with a substance use disorder. When I talk about a person struggling with substance use, I refer to them as a person with a substance use disorder. 31. The ways we define addiction are deeply bound in social and cultural context. The ways we define addiction are deeply bound in social and cultural context. Finally, 32. Approaches to treating addiction must be developed in ways that center the perspectives of those with lived experience. Approaches to treating addiction must be developed in ways that center the perspectives of those with lived experience. Those are all 32. My challenge for you all is not to go back and start changing your answers. Leave them as they are. If there are ones you did not answer or were not sure how to answer, go and circle them if you'd like, but do not go start changing answers and fumbling with what your responses were. All right, deep breaths. We're going to get some kind of basic background information here just to set up the stage for the rest of the conversation for the next 30 minutes or so. First, what in the world is a paradigm? We call this the paradigms training. We call it the paradigms inventory, survey, etc. Generally, a paradigm is a general mental model or framework for anything, which in that sense, it kind of means nothing other than a way of thinking. But when it comes as professionals and folks bringing your own individual backgrounds to this work, it means the basic assumptions, ways of thinking, and the methodology that are commonly accepted by members of a scientific or otherwise community. So it's, again, these ways that we are trained, taught, enforced that we should be thinking about things, and that shows up differently. And it shows up through the survey in our how, so our general attitude and stance, and so the approaches that we see as valid, our what, so our actions and their associated outcomes, and then our why, so our motivations and our end goals. Another challenge I have for you is to not, as we go through these paradigms, is to understand that they each have pros and cons, and that you likely see all of them in your work, but they dance. They dance constantly in ways that are really confusing sometimes, ways that are wildly frustrating other times, in ways that maybe we consider ways we can change that or dance a bit more effectively, without necessarily asking you all to leave on the side your values and your principles. We want you to be able to just be pragmatic with this work. So that's what a paradigm is. But I'm going to, instead of telling the long form story of how this tool came to be, I'm going to give the very quick overview. And that is that early in my career, my job became to argue with everyone about everything, because it was very frustrating to me to feel that folks were making very quick decisions of very high importance with very little reflection or very little critical thinking about the information they had access to or the perspectives they were using. This framework we're going to go through is inspired by social justice movements like the disability and accessibility movements in the United States. I did not come up with these paradigms on my own. They're very much modeled after the ways that, like, the ADA was passed, for example. And the story we share a lot is substance use disorder is covered under the ADA. So it's covered under disability protections in our country. But it's only covered if you have stopped using illicit substances. And so the ADA truly covers people in recovery if they identify as in recovery, meaning they are abstinent from anything illicit. But the moment you use an illicit drug, you are no longer covered with your civil protections. Somehow, and we could spend all day talking about it, that led us to making this tool, because it led to some really interesting conversations about how do we think about this work and why are things the way that they are, and how do we, for example, make decisions about very large sums of money, and how do we distribute those resources. So Chelsea, I'm gonna need your help with this, and the folks online, I'm gonna need you to just participate in the chat. I need everyone to answer this question either in person or via the chat. I'm going to go through them one by one. The question is, addiction is a multiple choice question, A, condition, B, disease, C, disorder, or D, all of the above. I'm going to have you raise your hand or respond in the chat. So Chelsea, I need you to count for me. So if you agree to what I say, raise your hand. Addiction is a condition.
None in the room.
Addiction is a disease.
One in the room.
Addiction is a disorder. I don't see anything in the chat yet. So
Three.
see D's coming in. Okay, so addiction is all of the above.
All the above. I feel like
D's.
A little social conformity.
Totally.
Yeah, bad news, everybody. Let's try again. We're going to do it without D being an option. And I have this slide pre-made every single time because the answer is exactly the same every time I do it, with groups of 500 or groups of 10. So we're going to start again. Addiction is a condition. A, who agrees? If D is not an option anymore, addiction is a condition.
I got 2 in the room. It doesn't look like there's any in the chat.
Okay. Addiction is B, a disease. I see it online on the chat. We get a lot of B's, a couple A's.
Yeah. If we're taking D off, I'll take B. 10, 11, 12. I got 13, 14 B's.
A lot of disease in the chat. Okay. Addiction is a C disorder. And anybody, we have 1 C in the chat.
In the room.
Okay.
Wow.
6 B's online. Okay. So the reason we do this exercise is first to just show that, yes, you're going to go through paradigms as 4 separate ways of thinking. And the reality is going to be that you use all of them in interesting ways combined all day long. But we make choices based on you having to pick one. So if you're writing a policy, policies rarely can balance multiple conflicting views. They end up having to pick one. And if there's conflicting views in it, it gets very confusing very quickly. If it comes to responding in direct services work, how you treat someone in a specific instance sometimes is influenced by how you would answer this question. So just be thinking to yourself, when maybe recently have you had to choose, or when do you really choose? And that may be useful as we move into these paradigms. Because, as it says on the slide, when we track beliefs and attitudes over time, we develop a structure to reflect on the addiction and recovery movement and how to find our role in it. In short, how we think about addiction matters. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go through each of the paradigms. I'm going to walk you through the tenets of that paradigm, And then after we do that, I'm going to have you do some math. Yes, I apologize. We're doing math today. I'm going to have you do some math about what your score, if you will, for that paradigm is. We're going to do them one by one. My goal for you is to have you not move ahead of me. You'll see on the back side of your handout, if you have it, that there are 4 places to do some math. If you already worked ahead, again, so sad. Sorry to hear that. But if you didn't work ahead yet, please don't and stay with me. So we're going to start with one of them, the moral paradigm. The moral paradigm has a handful of core tenets here. First is that addiction and also substance use is rooted in individual and group moral failings, character defects, and or ignorance. The saying being, if you knew better, you would do better, and therefore you would be better. Recovery is about taking responsibility and or making amends. The focus here is on the individual and their role in the cause of the addiction or the use, alongside a focus on the impact on innocent bystanders. There's a condemnation of bad influences causing these problems because they're bad people. And then finally on here, ideally a society should have no addiction. The underlying piece here that's in the blue is that shame and threatening social connection or support can be utilized as a change motivator. With those things in mind, I want you to do some math here. So you're going to find each of these questions on your list. So question 1, 7, 13, 12, yada, yada, yada. And you're going to record your score for each of those questions, and that should give you a score less than 40. So I'm going to give you about 45 seconds to do your math. But this initial score will give you your affinity, if you will, to the moral paradigm. And in line with the moral paradigm, if you are already feeling shame about any way you've answered with the moral paradigm, I encourage you to pause that. We'll talk about it later, but no judgment at this point. I will have you at the end of each of all these paradigms, once we're done with all 4, I'll have you submit your scores confidentially or anonymously. There's a difference there, but that doesn't actually matter for this survey. You'll submit your scores, and then I will either, if we have time, I'll show them to you all what the average score of this meeting was. If not, I'll send them to Chelsea, so Chelsea can use those to help you all reflect in future meetings. Okay. In 10 seconds, we're going to move on. So if you need these numbers still, take a mental screenshot. You should have done your math. If you have a score higher than 40, we have a big problem, because that means something was counted twice, or you scored a 10 out of 5 on one of your questions. Hopefully that didn't happen. The next paradigm, which comes historically after the moral paradigm, is the disease, or what we can call the medical paradigm. I'll use disease and medical interchangeably, potentially during this presentation. Just know that they're referring to the same thing. You'll submit your scores at the end, Sandy. I'll have a QR code for you all. The core tenets of the disease or the medical paradigm will be, first, that addiction is caused by physical or mental or genetic deficiencies or abnormalities. So someone is physically, mentally, or genetically different than what we consider normal. People with substance use disorder are physically or chemically impaired. There's a focus on curing the problem, alleviating symptoms, or managing chronic issues. Addiction, therefore, is a pathology. You test it, you identify it, and then you treat it. Finally, of these tenets here, addiction and recovery are to be understood through the perspectives of those with medical or clinical expertise. This is where we all hear what we're clearly very familiar with in the chat, which is addiction is a disease, not a moral failing. Many of us, if we were in person, I'd have you raise your hand if you've heard that, or if you were taught that. The thing that I want to pull apart here, which makes this work actually, I think, really rewarding and really interesting, is that the idea that addiction is a disease, that idea precedes the research proving any relationship to addiction or substance use disorder as a disease. That was initially a advocacy point. So it was in response to the moral model, and that idea that addiction is a disease has been valuable for progress such as insurance coverage, the growth of the treatment industry, and is a really strong approach to destigmatization. The interesting dynamic here is that this is this, up until this point in history, up until about the 1930s, the addiction movement, the recovery movement or the addiction movement, we're going to count them as the same thing here. That movement alongside the disability rights movement, they were on the same trajectory. At this point in history, though, we see a break where the addiction and recovery movement sit here accessibility movement moves quickly forward towards different ideas or different ways of thinking. So as we move forward in the conversation, be thinking about why that is. Again, we know here on this slide that it's for very pragmatic reasons of getting people treatment and insurance support and all of those things and destigmatization, but hold that alongside the idea that this as an advocacy point preceded the research in the medical support and the treatment support that was based upon this. It's an interesting dynamic. I know it's complicated and we don't have nearly enough time today to go into all of that history, but this paradigm can be really interesting to think about when it comes to the addiction and substance use disorder work. Now, same thing. We're going to do some math here. And we do this math for questions 2, 6, 11, 14, 17, 20, 21, and 29. And as we do the math for each of these, be thinking of where do you recognize this paradigm in your work? What does it remind you of? Does your score seem to reflect what you think you believe? Repost question 6. Let me, oh gosh. I have so many screens up. If anyone who's helping online has question 6, let me know.
Yeah, absolutely. I can put it in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rosie.
No problem.
Give you about 30 more seconds. Okay, about 10 more seconds. Cool. Again, you should have a score less than 40. And also very rarely with any of these paradigms, we have someone get a 40 out of 40. If you do, let me know. It's a fun little celebration for me every time. Fun little outlier. So the next paradigm, moving towards, this is going to be more reflective for many of us of what we see as discussions around disability than what we see about addiction. And that's an interesting, again, break, but also you may be surprised of how much you do see yourself or see your work in these extra paradigms here. So the social paradigm, core tenets here. First, environmental factors create substance use disorder by A, developing conditions for coping or escape, or B, enforcing norms or expectations. So the idea of what use of substances is acceptable and what isn't. Can two substances be used similarly, where one is considered a substance use disorder and one is not? Interesting thought process there, interesting thought experiment there. This is reflective of the idea that, for example, with folks who move about the world in a wheelchair, that being in a wheelchair would be less of a disability if more buildings were simply more accessible, or if they were built with ramps as a obvious thought process there. So it's kind of where this thought process comes from again, is that the environment creates disability in many ways. Next one here, substance use disorders are enforced through prejudice, stereotypes, and discrimination. And so we will identify folks as having a substance use disorder, but we also enforce them of, I'm judging you, I am treating you differently because of what I perceive about you. Third, inflexible policies and procedures create barriers to inclusion and pragmatic approaches to support. So not every time that we want to support somebody can we support them, because our policies and procedures often can be barriers themselves. Next, substance use disorder is more indicative of problems in our society than problems with individuals. So do you see substance use disorder as a societal issue or a reflection of society, or do you see it as the individual experience? Finally, on the slide, substance use disorder is culturally defined and intertwined with questions of diversity and inclusion. So the two things on the bottom of this slide that may have stuck out to some of you in the survey is first person, first language. So that's the idea where instead of saying that someone is an addict or a junkie, for example, you would say this is a person with a substance use disorder if they've been diagnosed. You say person first so that you can humanize them, and then you would describe them after affirming their personhood. That really comes from the disability movement in this paradigm. And the focus of this paradigm is reacting to and dismantling stigma, which is an interesting dynamic when the previous paradigm was also about reacting to and dismantling stigma. But they kind of then, you see how they like Russian nesting doll themselves. If this one's reacting to this one and the next one's reacting to the one before that, that will be clear again for the next paradigm we do. But again, for those of you who are social workers or are familiar with like the social determinants of health, the social paradigm probably makes a lot of sense. More math. So we have some more questions here. You'll add them up and get a score less than 40. So questions 3, 4, 10, 16, 22, 26, 30, and 31. And Chelsea scanned the room for anybody who isn't doing math because they looked ahead. Kick them out of the room. They're gone. Just kidding. I understand. At this point, if you are just sick of waiting for me to tell you to do math and you want to finish the math for the other paradigms, that's okay. The goal is to keep you engaged as we go, which the math does that sometimes. So about 30 more seconds. Okay, we're going to get this last one done relatively quickly. My goal is to have at least 10 minutes to discuss some of the questions that we brought. But this last paradigm here is what we call the neurodiversity paradigm or the identity paradigm. Those are not the same term. Many of you know that, but we do use them largely interchangeably when it comes to this tool because their history is similar when it comes to this perspective. First, relationships that individuals have with substance use can be incredibly complex and diverse. Labels serve to develop somewhat arbitrary groups that can be more accurately understood as spectrums. So it's not that someone is or is not experiencing a substance use disorder. It is that we live on the spectrum of some of us have maybe more or less problematic relationships with substances or with consequences for that. Second, substance use is not itself inherently pathological, negative, tragic, or unhealthy. Instead, it can be valuable when truly understood. We could have a whole day conversation about this, surely. There are international conferences about this one. Third, neuronormative standards, so that there are people with normal ways of thinking or normal brains, if you will, and those that aren't. So neuronormative standards and stigma about people who use drugs are what cause the most harm. So it's this enforcement of us versus them when it comes to who is normal and who is not that end up causing most harm. And then finally here, we need to listen to people with a relationship to addiction and or substance use to understand what well-being looks like for them. As makes sense there, empowerment of a positive self-identity and agency of folks is therefore the focus. We can talk more about these here, but I want to do the math first. So the math here is 5, 8, 9, 15, 19, 25, 28, 32. Many of you have probably already done this math and or moved past me. That's perfectly fine.
I also want to interject here. I've said this before, but I will say this until the end of time, is that someone can have a substance use disorder diagnosis on a continuum of mild, moderate, or severe per individual substance that they use. And a substance use disorder is diagnosed on the 4 C's: compulsion, control, craving, consequence to self or other. So when you think of people who are polysubstance users like fentanyl and alcohol and marijuana, we have to be very cautious of how we interpreted those stats, especially in terms of severity.
Yep. And y'all are going to have a real fun exercise now where anytime anybody says anything in a meeting, you can think through like, ooh, what paradigm might that be through? Ooh, where could be the pros and cons of that statement? So I'm going to try not to do that here today, even though it's going to basically, if we had a full 2 hours, that would be my job, is to like be that person in the room, but I'm going to try to hold back for today. So if you have the worksheet, you should be able to draw your unique paradigm. So you'll see you have a circle You then, for disease on this one, I'm guessing their disease ranking was somewhere around 12. Each of the rings there's a ring every 4. Their identity was probably 16. Their social was probably 32. Moral was probably 18 or so. You then connect the dots to the ones beside them, and then you create a 4-sided paradigm. Like I said before, it's unlikely that anyone scored 0 out of 40 on any of the paradigms. It's also unlikely that anybody scored 40 out of 40 on any of the paradigms. But many of us will have maybe a dominant paradigm or dominant paradigms. But our personal approach often includes all of them and the contradictions between them. We're going to have 10 minutes here to discuss some questions, and I want to have you all discuss a little bit before we do that. Please, this QR code should work. Someone in the room wants to test it for me, or someone online wants to test it for me. This is just a spreadsheet that you shouldn't have to log in for or shouldn't have to do anything for. You should just be able to put in your 4 scores. There's 4 questions. Put in a score for each paradigm, press submit, and then we're good to go. So I'm going to give you about 10 more seconds to scan this QR code. And then there is also, the link in the chat for those who want that. Thank you, Rosie. 3, 2, 1. Cool. Keep doing that if you are doing it. 1 or 2, maybe 3 people. Any initial thoughts, reflections, reactions to what we've experienced so far? Anything that is like sticking out to folks that they want to bring forward?
I have a quick question. Do people typically like spike in one category and the rest are lower, or do you ever see like people are high in all the categories?
Yeah, we always have this. We have, again, I can do this for a full day or a half day. We have widely different time frames in which we do this. There is often a fun discussion when we have a full day of, what does it mean to have a team member that has 4 identical scores? And how do they work with someone who has 1 very strong score and 3 very small scores? There is no usual when it comes to this, but those dynamics are common. Some of us like to be kind of middle of the road, or maybe have experiences that put us towards that. And some of us maybe have singular, more transformative perspectives that really focus us in a specific direction. It depends. So it's a good question.
I think I saw hands from Sean and then Sophia.
Cool.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I come from a peer support background, and I was really heavy on the social and identity, which from the peer support background makes sense. We talk about the lived experience being, we talk about the stigma being an issue.
Yeah. We often see with peer folks, just as often as we see like that, yes, very high identity and social, we also see in folks that maybe have a more, I'll say it, 12-step background, often we see like the moral spike is pretty high and the social or identity spike is very high. And that is often more of a result of, again, socialization and what we've been taught and experiences we've had. And yeah, how does that person work with someone who doesn't have that same paradigm, for example? So yeah, it's interesting. We have 1 more, I believe.
Mayor Budd in the room.
So are we drawing straight lines between the 4?
I have the example on the screen now.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're almost right in the middle. You're pretty even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you bring any stars or anything?
For folks who maybe are like, well, what does this even mean? Why are we doing this? This is where we're at in terms of the paradigm, is using it, gathering data, having discussions, because we do think there will come a point where we can make more robust conclusions from paradigms data. For example, does someone who has an even 4 scores, what could their role best be in this work? And what, like I said before, what is the difference between maybe someone with lived experience who's showing one paradigm and lived experience with a different paradigm? How do we help those folks more directly rather than just giving them scores and saying good luck? But again, you all will get into that with Chelsea in future sessions. One more thought, if anybody has anything else they want to share. I think there was one more person online that had raised their hand. Amber had asked, does our paradigm score inform how we define addiction, a condition, disease, etc.? It likely does. It will inform or reflect, I think is the differentiation I would make, is it should reflect the underlying assumptions you make. The interesting piece, as I said about the disease model, is I know hundreds and hundreds of people who are very quick to say as an advocacy point that addiction is a disease, but score very low on the disease paradigm. Again, what does that mean is up to each individual, and how does that reflect what they have learned, not learned, what they enforce, what they don't enforce. This is to, at this point, start the conversation and see what comes from it. And then counselor had asked, do you do this work with treatment centers that are outside of medical, like sober homes, church groups? Yes, very much do. Yeah. I do this presentation. I've done it with, there's a statewide treatment group here in Colorado that I did it with. But yeah.
Well, I guess as like a follow-up for that, I'm who put that question in. My question is more like, you're talking about how 12-step programs tend to be a little bit more in that social space, even though they're also very like, this is not like, this is outside of your power, it's a disease kind of vibe. And I'm wondering if like, you're saying that people who talk political advocacy using it as a disease versus people who like run a sober home, like, right, like sober homes like are really treatment based on social dynamics, not medical. But I also sort of feel like my limited experience with those programs are that like they do tend to understand that it's a little more outside of an individual's control because of just witnessing it all the time. And I'm sort of hearing that.
I think you're spot on. The fun part that we see with this survey is that it is very individualized. And so if a staff, for example, I was working with the treatment facilities here in the state, we found that there was a staff-wide paradigm when you combine them all, but who we defer to in each situation is where kind of the rubber meets the road. In a church group, for example, if I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, I will speak for myself and what I experienced growing up. Even if there were individuals in our group that were more identity or social focused, we deferred to the voices that were more moralizing, because that was just who in the space had most power. And so it depends very strongly on that context of who you defer to and what data sources mean the most to you. And I mean data in a very broad sense there. So yeah, it definitely shifts with each group, but often we are surprised by what we see because it is also so individual. So yeah, again, great question.
May I make a quick comment before we move on? Dylan, this is Rhiannon. I get to help facilitate this group. And I think that this was a brilliant way to frame the work that you all are about to do around the next funding round, the next RFA round, because most of the people in the room here would consider themselves or are becoming subject matter experts when it pertains to substance use and opioid use disorder. And yet we all just came at this with such very different scores and answers. And I think the most important takeaway here is that all of this is extremely gray. And if we are not acknowledging the differences that we all kind of bring to the table when we're deciding on who to fund, how to fund, where to put our money, we are missing the point. And so to have so many like-minded folks who are, in agreement on how we tackle this, coming together and getting such kind of diverse scores across this survey, I think really speaks to the need to continue to talk about it and to collaborate on our various perspectives. Because as Dylan just made clear, like there isn't a right answer. We don't have the right answer, but if we aren't acknowledging the differences that we all come to the table with, we're missing our best chance at getting the answer right. And so I just wanted to say thank you. I really appreciate this lens. I've been struggling with how to suggest or like present to this group the disease model and any alternatives. And this was a lovely way to kind of start getting the group to think about the gray in the work that we're doing.
We call it playing between paradigms.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And yeah, the thing that I want to add to that too is that with this, there's kind of levels to this. The first level is, yes, kind of finding the middle and knowing that you can play in the middle. The next step is doing the opposite, of then being very, very critical about in which spaces are which paradigms deferred to, and in which spaces are certain paradigms seen as more truthful or more useful than others, or more correct than others, I think is a more appropriate way to say it there. When you're reviewing a grant proposal, are you more likely to defer to someone who has a medical license than someone who has peer support experience? Which perspective comes more, which one shines more brightly in a grant proposal, for example? You all can answer that for yourself. We'll answer that here in a couple of slides. I know I'm out of time here. But a couple more thoughts. I just want to, and so again, yes, it's finding the middle so you can collaborate, but also not watering down the conversation as if there is no answer, because our job is to create answers. And so how do you do both at the same time is a wild experience. And I love doing it. That's why I do my job, but I also know it's very hard. Quick things, since I'm out of time here, I want to go through, I just want to show you what the other questions were that, again, Chelsea can take you all through in future meetings, but it's important to think about how your personal paradigm may compare with the expectations of other council members. So again, as was just kind of said, how do you navigate the room you're in right now? According to your paradigm, what perspectives do you center for the sake of getting more deference or getting more progress? Who is seen as more powerful or not because of what perspectives they center? Again, with all of this, where do you notice tension around that? The next one is, how do you think your paradigms, or even the paradigms in this room, compare to the expectations and norms of your community members? Where do you notice the most tension there? And then, as was said a couple minutes ago, how do you think your personal paradigms compare to the abatement council administering the settlement dollars? You went through this one. I will close with a couple points. I apologize for going a couple minutes over, Chelsea. The one thing is, I'm going to say aloud the averages we got for your scores, which I think will surprise some of you. The moral paradigm out of 40, the average was 18.
That's good.
For disease, out of 40, the average was 23. For social, the average out of 40 was 29. For identity, the average out of 40 was 28. Does that reflect what you the conversations you often hear and the way that things are often framed? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe, this show, what I would assume based on this is knowing that socially the moral and disease paradigm get a lot more, they're louder in these rooms. I would encourage everyone to be more willing to at least bring up the social and identity paradigm from their own experience and see how that lands, because you may be more surprised than not there are more people in this room who defer to that perspective than not, even though the others are often more powerful and more potent. So on the screen, I just want to say these are the sentiments from the survey that people have agreed to the most through I think we've had almost 2,000 people take this survey at this point. Person first language is useful as it helps us center the humanity of an individual over a diagnosis. Stigma is one of the most harmful aspects of substance use disorder. Recovery pathways should be unique and tailored. Addiction should be viewed with co-occurring mental health conditions and traumas, and that treating addiction should be developed in ways that center lived experience. Those are the most agreed upon statements from folks that take this survey. The least agreed upon statements, so the ones that folks score the lowest on average, can be surprising to folks. First, it is critical that we do not tolerate individuals or groups who use drugs. Second, abstinence is an important first step in overcoming addiction. Third, if individuals knew more about substances, their use would decrease. Fourth, I maintain a level of skepticism about someone once they learn that they use drugs. And then fifth, which I've had hours long discussions on this one. One day we will discover a cure for addiction. I encourage you to think to yourself, what does this have to do with your work? And what does this reflect about the people you're working with? Some of this can be surprising and some of it can be sad. But here we are. The last, is that a question in the room?
Yeah, Leslie has one in the room.
Yeah, I can wait. I can wait until you're done. I was just gonna just share a couple of quick reflections on this. This is an incredible conversation. It's really good. So I'll stop. I'll wait until you're finished and then circle back.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate that. It's all very kind. this is the where the like truly where the rubber meets the road is that I am going to be the person that defers to research on this right now, which again can be a paradigms move, whatever you want to think on this. But there is a piece of research that was out of Harvard in 2021 that shows, for example, the dance between the disease model and the social model. Because typically we lump moral and disease and social and identity together because it's what the data tells us is happening in many of our responses. But there's a piece of research I want to explain really quickly. First, this piece of research said that researchers found that there is not one single term that can reduce all potential stigma biases. In that research, they found that while some terms were very good at reducing certain types of stigma, these same terms increased other types of stigma and vice versa. So how does this work? When I asked you at the beginning, addiction is a disease or a condition or the 4 options, what does that mean? What it means is that there are 2 main buckets here. Again, addiction is a medical issue or a brain disease, and addiction is a behavioral health or a social issue. When you refer to addiction as a brain disease or a medical issue, you lower the stigma around the idea that people are to blame for their substance use disorder. PWSUD means people with substance use disorder. You decrease stigma around the idea that people with substance use disorder should be excluded, but you increase stigma around the idea that people cannot recover and that they may be dangerous if they have substance use disorder because it's something that's wrong with them. So it's not their fault because it's a disease, but they're broken. So what do we do with that? On the other side, you see the opposite. If it's a social issue or a behavioral health issue, we will blame people and we will exclude them because they are the problem, or their social connections can be used as a cudgel, if you will. But because it's a social issue, they can recover and they don't necessarily have to be seen as dangerous. So the final quote of that research is, if you want to decrease stigmatizing blame, use more medical terminology. But if you want to increase confidence that the person can recover and is not dangerous, use of non-medical terminology may be best. How do you do both at the same time? The answer is you don't. Then what do you do is the question. Great, we're gonna move on then. I don't have an answer for you. So with that, that'll be the end. I will say thank you, and then we can chat if folks have questions. And thanks for having me, everybody.
Yeah, I feel like that emoji with the brain that just goes like that. Thank you, first of all, for walking us through this. It was really incredible. And I would love to see if there's a way, if GROC is interested in doing this, to continue to reflect on what we learned and how it influences the decisions we make around where we allocate dollars and why. I think that's important. And it was so funny because personally, as I was taking this survey, in some ways for me, it reinforced what I don't know about this topic. I don't come with any special expertise or background. And I feel that I've learned much more in just the 3 years that I've had the honor to work with everyone on GROC. But it is interesting to see how those numbers shake out when we actually add them up. And the other thing too is I also think there's a component in here, and your last slide really brought it home for me, last slide or second to the last slide, in how we communicate about the rationale behind where we place dollars and how we help connect those dots for our community, especially when they ask, why here? Why did you give money to that program and not that program? And I do think that there's something to be said about recognizing that we have different lenses that we look through and different experiences or perceptions as we do this work together. So there's really a lot to dig into from this conversation. I just want to thank you for giving us time to do that. And I hope this won't be the last of those conversations. It's great.
Now I asked Dylan to come and do this early in the year because this is a conversation I will weave into every meeting that we have, every question that you ask, every feedback that you give on an application. I will draw this in. This is something I've worked with Dylan on for a couple of years, validating the survey. This is a large part of my dissertation, the last 5 years of my work. I like to think I play in the paradigms very well. So yes, this will definitely be a continued conversation.
You had said something. I want to point out, folks, there are many of you, I'm sure, who are either online or in person who are leaving this conversation with the so what question, which is really powerful right now. And I want you to feel free to take any notes you have. any frustrations you have, because I've given this presentation to large groups and I have had people leave with the feedback of, thank you, Dylan, for causing more problems than giving us answers. And it's very valuable feedback and I appreciate it. And that's my job. Thank you. And then I'm more than glad, as Chelsea was saying, to use this to move forward, but we have to first unsettle before we can come to more useful outcomes. So I know Mayor Budd has a comment.
I just wanted to sort of piggyback on what Commissioner Dalkemper said. Not only does this inform sort of our perspectives, but also the programs that we're going to look at are going to have this sort of a filter also. So it's sort of being able to marry those two sides of the equation to come up with a decision.
Yep. All right. And on that note, I am going to do a hard pivot for time. Thank you again so much, Dylan. His contact information is in the chat. It's also the slide deck and the worksheet are on the agenda. And then I will include it in the follow-up email that's going to go out next week.
Awesome. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
All right, so some quick updates. The RFA window is currently open. I'm hosting webinars every Tuesday with open drop-in office hours every Thursday, both of which are recorded. So far, we've had 36 individuals across 6 webinars. These are not unique individuals, and it only counts live attendance, so it doesn't include people who are watching recordings on the YouTube channel. Office hours changed from a webinar link to a meeting link, so please make sure that you check the website. Please subscribe to the Google Calendar. That is the best way to get calendar invites for meetings. And then again, all of our recordings have moved to a YouTube channel so that you can watch things there. Another hard pivot, our Q1 summary report from the Elisa, you don't have to use Google to access the Google Drive or subscribe to the Google Calendar. Subscribing to the Google Calendar is more for non-voting members. The voting members have that WebEx link, which we decided we were only going to keep to voting members because it sends everybody a calendar invite every time. So that's okay. So the 2024 grantees have submitted their Q1 reports, and that is available on the website. If you go to 2024 grantees, it's right here, Q1 summary report. There is not a whole lot to report, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Everyone is still in very early stages of implementation. And what I did is I took their individual reports and I synthesized them into one main report. And then I tried to be critical of where people are having shortcomings, how those are going to be addressed moving forward. You need access to view it?
We can't view it, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It just came to my attention that it's not public, so I will make that public after the meeting. And then finally, we are going to be hosting listening tours in March. So this is me physically going into the community to kind of give an overview of what GROC is, the opioid settlement dollars, how people can get involved, and then also just listen to concerns at the community level, try to find organizations who are already doing this work who would benefit from funding. So I did send out a kind of like a when to meet type calendar for people to report some days and times. A lot of that is also contingent on space. I've been working with the county commissioners to get that done. So be on the lookout for that. Finally, we do need recovery story volunteers. So often in these meetings, we'll open with a recovery story or some type of substance use addiction recovery educational workshop like Dylan just provided. So again, on the website, if you go to the Get Involved tab, you can join the listserv to get email updates, become an application reviewer, share your addiction recovery story. That's going to be this one. Attend a meeting, subscribe to the Google Calendar, and then see the YouTube channel. All right, take a deep breath, roll your shoulders. We are going to get into the nitty gritty of today's meeting. So this was shared, let me back up. The council does not currently have a standard operating procedure manual or a handbook of how we do business as a council. And this is important for the fiscal agency relationship with Jefferson County. I'm going to oversimplify this, but in terms of purchasing, procurement, contracting vendors, Jefferson County is very much a pass-through agency for the GROC. However, Jefferson County manages our bank account. So in terms of accounting and auditing, we are part of Jefferson County. So in order to really separate that relationship, we need to have a standard operating procedure manual that tells the county's external auditing team that if we decide to procure something in a different way than is typical of county business, that's okay because we are not a county entity. We are standalone. So ideally, this document will possess all of the inner workings of the council. It is publicly available. There will be an opportunity for public comment on where we need to expand the document or clarify in the document. But right now, it is intended to be an organic living document. It grows with the council. The things that are in the document right now are not set in stone. Once we adopt it, if we realize that's not how we actually do things or there are better ways to do things, we can go back and amend it. The most important part of this document at this time are the fiscal controls and when we use different funding mechanisms. So that's going to be this whole section from like 9 to 10, 9 to 17 are going to be really important. 9 to 10, definitely the most important. So I am looking for, at minimum, a partial adoption of those headings. So I can send this document to the CFO and head of accounting for Jefferson County so that we can move forward with the program evaluation solicitation in the way that we want to do that. A full adoption will be even better. After speaking with legal, I do have to go through all of the comments that have been made. So there was a comment from Commissioner Dahl-Kemper to change this picture to be of Region 10. I'm working on that. Got some options.
I have those hard-hitting edits. Like, you really want them roomed? Are those?
Well, I think we're gonna, a picture of this building, perhaps.
You know, I get possessive of our region.
And also, please don't comment on the formatting. I don't know why it looks like this in Word Online. I'm huge on formatting. It needs to be aesthetically pleasing.
Poor Chelsea.
Colorado Attorney General's Office COAG, that was added to the glossary. Commissioner Marlin asked, does Jeffco audit these funds? I believe they do. I'm going to leave this comment here when we send it to the CFO and Heather from accounting so that they see what needs to be expanded here. And then I'll bring that back to the county on how that, or the council on how that happens. Commissioner Marlin also asked, is this for purposes authorized by the settlement agreement rather than the COAG? I don't think the COAG had the authority over our priorities. They don't have they don't control our priorities, but they do regulate us. We do have to submit to cost. We do have to submit a 2-year plan. They comment on the 2-year plan if it's reasonable or not. So I can again clarify the language in this section in a later review. Would you put in the chat?
Just that the fiscal agent does audit
Okay.
opioid settlement spending on behalf of the county that they represent, in my experience with other regions.
Okay. So we will add to that section after we meet with the CFO. Chris had some wording here, and I'm not going to accept that wording. I'm going to take both wordings to the CFO and Heather, head of accounting, to see which one they prefer. So we have a couple of options here. So I will keep copies of everything that we get. Mayor Budd said, consider clarifying the language here. On item 9 in the RFA process, the program manager notifies applicants and returns all application materials. We will always keep duplicates for history and for record, but documents will be returned back to applicants with the scorecards as a means of feedback. In July, I will also host a webinar on how do you revise and resubmit. You got your feedback, you didn't get funded, now what do you do? So how do you improve your application for a future round of funding? The DEI conversation is ongoing. It's also ongoing at the COAG's office, is that opioid settlement dollars are not federal dollars. So there is an outstanding question of whether we are restricted by recent executive orders surrounding DEI. In short, no. However, we do have relationships with government entities that do receive federal dollars that are subjected to those executive orders. So do we jeopardize that relationship in some way? As of right now, the answer is no. So we are leaving this in. Just keeping an eye on that hot topic issue.
Just dropped a press release from Phil Weiser and the Attorney General's office on this topic into the chat if people want to dig in further to Phil's opinion on how this is looking, just for some context.
I also discussed this topic in the webinar series, and so there are different ways that you can address this in your application. Kind of a history of what DEI was intended to do and how it was intended to operate versus what it may have evolved into for people to get a sour taste around the issue. So please go watch those webinars as well. There is also a question from legal of whether the GROC would like access to Jefferson County's BidNet service, which is the software they use to do procurement. I'm not entirely sure of that answer right now. I am prospecting more grant management software like Salesforce that can do what we need it to do. I don't know if county procurement software, it wasn't intended for grant making. That's very different than purchasing. So I don't have an answer if it will do what we want it to do yet. Commissioner Marlin suggested not putting sole source funding in here because that isn't an issue that has come up with the council yet. However, I do know this is a hot topic in our near future, immediately after the RFA window closes. So I am putting it in here proactively to also have Jeffco review what our anticipated process is, if they have comments or feedback for us in that. I saw a hand from Commissioner Marlin.
Yeah, just to clarify, I am fine with the sole source language. This piggyback language is something that can also be helpful, but I think we might want to consider adding at some point. We don't need to add it for its passage today.
And then this brings us into the present stance on capital. So this is not a policy on capital. It is a paradigm. It is a framework. It's something for us to ground our conversations in when we get those capital purchase applications at the end of March, because they're coming. I've already seen a lot of them. These are just ideas. I did put conservative stance and strategic stance have asterisks next to them because in my numerous conversations with voting members, I think this is where you stand. This can change at any time, but I do want to get some people's feel so that we can narrow this down to one stance today. Commissioner Marlin.
Sorry, that's an old hand. Since I have the floor, I would advocate for the strategic stance.
Is there a second for the strategic stance? Are there any points of conversation on other stances?
I'm gonna weigh in. This is Rihanna, and I have a hard time keeping my mouth shut. Based on everything that I've heard from you all over the last year and the barriers that we encountered in the last RFA funding round and the feedback that we got from folks who were considering applying but ran into this capital issue, my personal opinion, this is an opinion, is that the strategic stance is the right middle ground. It creates some guardrails and protections for Jeffco and the council, but does not do so starkly that I don't think people would apply. I think it's a nice balance. And I think you'll appreciate that sustainability nod in 5 or so years.
I'm also, for the reasons that have been mentioned, comfortable with the strategic stance. I do think it's a good middle ground, especially as I look at some of the other approaches that we have. And I think it integrates some of the different components of what's here as well to some degree. I'm really comfortable with that.
So is that a second? Because George,
do we need a motion on this or the whole thing?
I'm just doing the stance on capital right now.
Do we want to see if there's any other input? And does anyone have a different perspective? We can go to a motion. That's works.
Okay.
We have.
Hi, this is Sandy. I have my hand up, but I'm not sure if you can see it. I was deferring to the cautious, but I think that the cautious is kind of implied in the strategic. So I could go with the strategic as long as we use it cautiously. Thanks.
Sounds like everyone's Michael Miller also said I'd vote to second strategic. I'm not sure if it's technical. Well, if you're here and Dr. Suri's not, then you're Dr. Suri's proxy, Michael, so you can still vote. Michael Prang also says strategic, so I'm going to move it into an official motion of which stance we're accepting.
I'll make a motion to that we focus on the strategic stance regarding our position on capital.
Mayor Budd, I'll second that.
Thank you. So Leslie motioned, Mayor Budd second. We're going to vote in opposition. George.
This is not opposition. It sounds like that motion is about to pass. And I just want to share, I think, the need therefore is for us to really develop some policy around when we want to invest in capital, how we're going to try to control that investment, et cetera. So maybe those are some next steps in the future.
You are correct. All right, so there's no opposition. So the stance on capital as of now is strategic. Remember, we can always change that later. Sandy did mention in the document, it refers to the counties as the fiscal agent, but you would like to clarify that. Are you talking about the infrastructure, this section where it explains what the infrastructure share is?
Chelsea, I'm sorry. I don't have it up, and I was reading through it last night again just to see if anything popped, and it was kind of toward the bottom, but I don't have the document up and it's not showing up all that large. on the screen, so I can always find it later, but it's just a one sentence little reference, but it says at the, oh, there,
Yeah,
right there where
so-
you have your cursor.
Yeah, so this whole section talks about the infrastructure share and what, like, how the different processes work. So it explains that people can go through the GROC as a ROAC. They should reach out to me at least 90 days before the application due date. After an initial review with me, I will present the prospective project to the executive committee, who will determine if they want to move forward with learning more about that. And then that would go to the full council for a vote of whether they want to be the applicant on behalf of that project. In this instance, Jefferson County serves as the fiscal agent. If someone wants to go through a county as an applicant, that respective county would serve as the fiscal agent. So I just have a note there that that's an option for people, but we don't regulate that. People should reach out to the individual commissioners or whoever their point of contact is if they choose to go through a county or a municipality as a applicant. So people can theoretically approach Mayor Budd and have Wheat Ridge be the applicant to the COAG infrastructure share. That's an option, but you have to talk to Mayor Budd about that. And I'm assuming whoever your fiscal agent is for other grant projects would be your fiscal agent for that. But again, that doesn't have anything to do with us, so I'm not putting that in here.
But do you see how the bullet point right above it says Jefferson County is a fiscal agent, and then it just says everything else is fiscal agent? There's no, you just explained it in many, many sentences what your intent was. So it seems like in that second dark bullet point, maybe a little clarity about when the counties and municipalities would be the fiscal agent. I think that option 1 there is great.
I think that's a good clarifier, Chelsea. This is very specific to the infrastructure award and kind of a one-off.
That does it for me. Thank you.
Chelsea?
Yes, Mayor Budd.
Mayor Budd, you know, in the introduction of that is prospective applicants have 4, you just took it off my screen, 4 options. So you got option 1, and then we go into the second bullet point, which I would have thought would be option 2. And I've been still looking for option 3 and option 4, if there's truly different 4 options that you do a differentiation.
Is that a little bit better in the recasting? And I'll come back to this after. Some of this too is just for Jefferson County as fiscal agent to understand how we operate as a ROAC, a Regional Opioid Council. So I don't want to completely take it out just because that was relevant in conversations with the fiscal agent. But we will work on clarifying. Okay. We got council stance, that was answered. So in the conflicts of interest, Commissioner Merlin said, I prefer that we require this of voting and advisory members. So yeah, I think that's why Eric had drafted it with the brackets. So voting members declare conflicts of interest orally at check-in, and then non-voting members submit the QR form.
Chelsea, I have a question on the, so in our commissioner meetings, we have a declaration of conflict, but it's something on the agenda for the day. It seems like when you have us declare conflict, it's like anyone that's received funding, whether it's on the agenda for the day or not. Is that what you intend to do? Because once you receive funding, you're always going to say, I have a conflict every time. But if that's done and decided, I guess a little clarity on the intent.
So I can help you a little bit here. When we first started the introduction of disclosing conflicts of interest, Eric and John requested that if you are a recipient of funding, you announce it in every council meeting. I am acknowledging, Sandy, that that is redundant and we're saying the same thing over and over again. Chelsea, is it worth asking Eric and John if you could announce your conflict for a period of time? I am a recipient of GROC funding and my contract is through September of 2025, at which case I will disclose a new conflict if it exists.
I know Eric's not in here. Jean, are you in here? Can you weigh in on that now?
I can take a crack at it, Chelsea.
Help.
So the IGA that all the local governments entered into has a provision that actually counsels against having advisory members who receive funding. I believe this council has found it very useful to have advisory members that receive funding, and the IGA has a provision that addresses that. It says if advisory members are receiving funding, they must announce that, and it specifically says at every meeting.
So that's something, next time we look at the IGA, we might want to look at that.
Yes, but keep in mind, changing the IGA as opposed to the bylaws is a big deal. We have to go to a couple dozen different municipalities.
Okay, so then another point of clarity is that, so our sheriff's office received funding for co-responder. Do you want everyone in the county to say they have a conflict? Or do you want the commissioner, because I'm the final budget person, to say a conflict every meeting, or just Sheriff Armstrong as a recipient for his department?
I think as long as we have a record from someone of that funding being out there, so that if somebody's a drop-in for just that meeting, they hear it. We don't need every person associated with Gilpin to say the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Chelsea?
Mayor Budd.
Mayor Budd, the question, does that, since the advisory member is noted in the IGA, does that mean that we should include only the advisory members in this document to disclose it? And so if you're a voting member, you would not disclose that?
Eric.
You can always require more. If you want, if GROC believes greater disclosure is better, there's no reason you can't also have voting members make a disclosure.
For Chelsea's facilitation ease, it may be easiest to let voters and advisory members disclose their conflicts and just do it all at once, so that Chelsea doesn't have to live differentiate who's who, are they voting, are they not voting? Let's just at the beginning of every meeting, whether it's through the form, in the chat, disclose what your conflict is, advisory, voting, get it out there, and then we can move forward. It's an opinion though, that's my opinion, y'all.
I think how we've been doing it, where when we do roll, we meet quorum, declare conflicts of interest, and then the non-voting members submit that QR code. I have it all right here that I can just go through and see name, conflict of interest, and then announce them to the group. That also keeps that running record of meetings that we had So it's categorized by the meeting date and what the conflicts of interest were. How we've been doing it works really well for me. I see your wheels spinning.
No, I was just looking at that because I saw your hand pop up earlier, but I wasn't sure.
Let me see if I understand it, Mayor Buddy. So we have a running list of the history of the conflicts. Would you ask at each meeting, are there any updates or additions or deletions from that conflict of interest? Or do you want everyone at every meeting?
It has to be everyone at every
Everyone at every
meeting
meeting.
per the IGA.
Okay. So you might go through a roll call.
Of only the voting members, yes.
What about the advisory members?
No, not yet. We're not there yet.
Okay. So we would,
All the advisory members do the QR code.
okay, so,
And I only read out the list of conflict of
Okay.
interest.
but we would only need to do that if we make it more restrictive by adding voting members to the advisory member definition, or not definition, but requirement in the IGA.
I think the clarifying question here, and Eric, you can help us with this. In the IGA, does it say that voting members must also disclose conflicts of interest?
It does not say that voting members must disclose whether their entity receives funding. So this is a very specific type of conflict.
Does that help you think through your preference?
Helps me immensely, yes.
Chelsea, suggestion to try to move us on. I appreciate you started this conversation by saying that this is a living document. I wonder if we could agree that this document reflect current practice, which is for advisory and voting members to announce conflicts of interest at the top of the meeting. And we can continue to discuss this. I know right now what you need today in the next 20 minutes is to get as much of this document as approved as possible.
Yes, and I did, thank you so much. And I did share the COAG released a conflict of interest statement last month. And I did share that with Eric. So Eric is also kind of sorting through what we already have and what that document is and how we can improve this section. So we'll just make a note to come back to this in the future. So that does conclude all of the comments in the section. So I would like to move on and open the floor to anyone, any non-voting member who might have a comment about this document so far. And then from there, I would like to move into a motion of either partially adopting or fully adopting the document in its first round.
Chelsea, I think like you did earlier, it might be helpful after comments to actually have a motion on this advisory versus all issue because of the way the draft is currently written for conflicts.
So is how it's written, this is how we've been doing things, right?
No, the bracket is what is required and the italicized explains what has been happening.
Okay, so then can I get a motion to cross out advisory and just say all members? So that's aligned with how we've been doing business.
Let me have a question, Mayor
Yes.
Buddy. So I'm a representative, I believe I'm a municipal representative from, I guess, all three counties, or we have a municipal representative from each county?
You're for the entire region in your role.
Okay,
In your current role.
so would I be representing municipalities that have received GROC funding in either Jefferson, Gilpin, or Clear Creek County?
No, I would say it is only if your municipality has received funding that you would be required to make the disclosure.
Okay, and that would be my municipality, whether it was a single entity or whether it was a co-recipient or if our police department had and we had one in the first, a co-responder with Jefferson Center for Mental Health. I think we got co-responders for our police department. So would that advise me to disclose that conflict?
Yes.
Oh, yes. I was like, the JC and me. Only one person.
I guess he knows too. Makes you feel better. Eric, can you explain why that's a yes?
Yeah. So, and I didn't quite hear what people were saying. Perhaps there's some confusion because of what I told Commissioner Hollingsworth about not needing her and the sheriff from Gilpin to all announce the same conflict. It strikes me as a little bit different that we have two completely separate entities, Wheat Ridge and the JCMH. And if I'm coming to my first ever GROC meeting, I don't know, but if JCMH says they're a funding recipient, that Wheat Ridge is also.
Or if you're a member of the public who's like chiming in, and that's a big part of why we're trying to be transparent. Thank you, that helps me.
George, you have a comment?
No, my apologies. That's an old hand.
Okay.
You got a lot of old hands, George.
We're all
You know what happens at those CCI meetings, George, when you leave your hand up?
It means I owe you donuts.
That's the next meeting, right?
So I'll go back to asking for a motion to cross out advisory. That way it's any member who receives funding, which is aligned with how we've been doing business.
So moved.
Leslie motioned. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. We're gonna vote by opposition. In the chat, please. I don't see any, so motion is approved. So then that will go into a final floor discussion on the first draft of the document from anybody, voting, non-voting.
Just to move the conversation along, I'll share, there are a couple of comments that from me that aren't perfectly resolved, and I'm more than happy supporting this document being passed with either changes being made as you investigate these things or just as is with those things to be investigated later.
I would look for an approval with the comments with the question marks, because I don't have, like, for example, the comment from Chris Habgood about the fiscal controls and slightly changing that verbiage. I'm gonna leave both because I don't know what the county as fiscal agent would prefer. So the initial adoption will allow me to take this document as a tentative GROC document to Jefferson County. They would review it, make some comments. I'll bring that back. We'll do another round of approvals, maybe some additions. I'll go back to the fiscal agents. I'll pass it off to Leslie.
Yeah, I would be comfortable at this time making a motion to approve the tentative document, knowing that there's some additional work that will be done on it. Just as you've described, it will come back to the GROC for further consideration as we address some of these issues along the way. But I think an extraordinary amount of work has been done on this. And thank you, by the way, Chelsea, for leading this effort. Thanks to everyone who has also weighed in. So I'll make that motion.
This is Mayor Button. I'll second that motion.
I just a quick question. Sorry to belabor the conversation about this motion. Does this motion give you latitude, Chelsea? Because I would like to give you latitude to have the document ultimately reflect what these last few comments are trying to accomplish and not have to come back to the GROC. Like, it could go one way or the other and I would still support it. So is there a way to just give you the latitude?
Yes, approving the document as it is right now would give me the latitude to go to the next round. I guess if you don't want me to come back to you, like these are minor. I think most of the question marks don't really have to do with the GROC as an operating council. It has more to do with Jefferson County as fiscal agents separating the GROC as its own entity. It's more just what kind of words they prefer.
That's my point. And what I would prefer is that after today, you have what you need from the GROC to be able to start putting RFAs out.
Yes, I would.
And do you have that under the current motion, or do we need to redo the?
I have that under the current motion. So we got Leslie as the first, Bud is the second, and so we'll vote by opposition in the chat. I'm not seeing anything. Yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you guys so much. A huge shout out to John and Eric and Kate for the 10 other review rounds that we got before here. Yeah, this is also emerging across the state as an example document for other regions to do the same thing. Again, really separating that fiscal agency relationship, allowing the councils to operate independently. So as soon as I get approval of this from the CFO and Heather, we can announce that program evaluation solicitation, hopefully before the end of March.
Just have to double echo that. Shout out to Jean and Eric going through this document and helping us bring it together in this way. Thank you both so much. Really appreciate it.
Just a little bullet point before you move off of that screen.
This one?
The last one. Oh, this one here, yeah.
Yeah.
And bullet in number 8, the last line, you have specific a purchase order instead of a specific purchase order. So.
Thank you. All right. I will turn it over to Rhiannon, who has some announcements.
Oh, geez, it's my turn.
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Hi to those of you in the room. It was nice to meet some of you who are new faces for me. I am announcing that I have resigned from the Stedman Group. My last day with the organization will be Wednesday, March 5th. I am working really closely with Chelsea and my colleagues, Rosie and Burke, both of which who are on the call. And I think many of you have gotten to meet in various ways to make sure that y'all are still in great hands. It's been really exciting for me to see Chelsea step into this role. I know that you are going to do big, huge, wonderful things with me gone. But I also feel so personally connected to each of you and just really want to say thank you for the trust that you placed in me and the Stedman Group, for watching me kind of figure this out as we go. We really did grow into this together, and I will be forever grateful to each of you in the room, for all of our advisory members, for all of our voting members. Jean and Eric, I'm so sorry for all of the emails. So grateful to each of you. I've learned so much. I'm choking back tears because I care about you all immensely. So thank you for the, I think, nearly 3 years we've been at this together. I'm not going far. I will still be around and available. So if anybody wants to connect either before I'm gone at Stedman or after, I'd be happy to share my personal email as well. And truly, I cannot thank you all enough. I am a better person, both personally and professionally, because of you all. And I can't wait to see what big, huge things GROC is going to do after I'm gone.
I'm going to ask George first if his hand was up, and then would love to make a comment. George, was your hand up to make a comment? Okay, we're now up to 24 donuts, I'd like to say.
We are, but I'll take the opportunity, and Leslie, I'll just steal your thunder for a second. Rhiannon, I'm sorry to not be in person today because it's your last time here, and wow, it's been special, and you are so tenacious. You really helped get so much done when we were just figuring it all out, and our early success is in large part due to your effort, and it's a personal effort. It's not clocking a time sheet and collecting a check by any means. You went way above and beyond, and we're going to miss you, and we're in good hands, and largely because of the structure that you helped build.
Thank you, George, so very much.
So I have to say, when we got the email, I immediately called Rhiannon, and all she heard from me was no. And that's because you have been, there's like magical skills that you have when you deal with a group like us that is so diverse and brings different experiences and different knowledge to the table. And you're able to weave together those different perspectives in a way that really advances our work. And it's so meaningful, not just for us as a council, but for our community, that ultimately, we hope will benefit in extraordinary ways from this work. And it's funny to also hear you say 3 years, because as we know, there have been some days where it's felt like a decade, because we really together have worked to kind of build an entire organization around this work. And you are so core to this, to our values, to our success, to everything we've done together. We're going to miss you so much, but you have really laid the foundation for us to move forward in an effective way. So grateful for you. Yeah, thank you.
The feeling is very mutual, you all. It really is. I'm seeing the love in the chat too. Thank you so much, everyone.
I have a final, yes, I have huge shoes to fill. I'm kind of scared that like you're leaving and I have to stand on my own, but I'm also very excited for your next chapter. And I'm very excited. You will all come to see a more ruthless facilitator because a lot of my job is dependent on getting your votes. So with that, there are several people who have not filled out.
Yes, excellent transition.
Yes, I am. Let me just unplug this so I can pull up my email, because I'm going to call you out by name because I've asked too many times for this now. It literally takes like 2 minutes.
Sorry, I gotta go. Bye.
Where'd that email go?
That's always the question, isn't it?
Right, it's so true.
What is my password for that email account?
That's right. And you so hope the search function works.
Oh my gosh. I sent it all this morning to you. Oh, you guys are lucky I cannot find this in a timely manner. But yes, thank you, Michael Miller, Janie, Leslie, Bud, Kristen, Barb, Heidi, and Elisa. You guys are all amazing. You have filled that out. Sandy, I know your name and you haven't filled it out yet, so let's call you out. Oh, there you got it. George, Sandy, Michael Prang, Kevin, Troy, Dr. Ryan, Sarah, Janie, optional, Chris, Eric, and John. I have not gotten bios from you. That is important to the website and people getting to learn who their community members are. So with that, we are closing out. The next meeting is going to be on March 24th. It is hybrid as of right now in the Fay Griffin Conference Room at the Jeffco Courts and Admin Building, as well as online. Again, if you go to the Gateway to the Rockies website, all of this information is under the work for you to access. The Google Drive documents are shared there. Again, here's all of your video links. Subscribing to the Google Calendar. This gives you directions to the Fay Griffin Conference Room. And that is it.
Chelsea, Can I just real quick though, for our next meeting, for the next 3 meetings, did you have a preference that we were here in person, given the conversations that we have ahead, or does that start in April?
That'll start in April. On the March 24th meeting, the bulk of the meeting will be learning how to use the evaluation tool for applications. So we'll have an education component. I'll show you a not great one, a decent one, and a really great one. And then you will actually use the Monday.com board. So if you need any type of technology assistance, I highly recommend coming in person. So that way we can go over that together. And then definitely April, May, and June meetings, please, please, please plan to attend in person because it does make those conversations a lot more lively. In March, I'll also be showing you a kind of like a process document of what those dialogues will look like for April, May, and June.
But you have a virtual meeting on April 14th, right? Except for that one?
Yeah, because we might not need that meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so these ad hoc meetings, the April 14th and the June 9th, we might not need those meetings. And so that'll be announced April 7th, whether we're having those meetings or not. Yes. And I'll update the website that has in-person, preferred, hybrid, virtual only. So keep an eye here. That's also updated on the Google Calendar. Oh, that downloads it. So then it syncs to your calendar.
I tried that and it didn't work. So.
If it didn't work, let me know because I can troubleshoot with you. It should take you here so it syncs with your calendar and all the links are in there. Are you on Mac? Oh. Yes.
Should we go ahead and?
Yep, that's it.
We'll get you taken care of.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see y'all.
Q.
It's not syncing.
Is that the, no, like when I download it, it takes me to which I don't use. It's not so.
And Chelsea can be to help with that.
Alrighty, thanks all. Do you need anything from me before hopping off?
Rosie,
I
I'll
just have
connect with
to-
you. This is Rhiannon. You're jump.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thanks all. And thank you.